Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. We'll take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the supplement Fantastic Terrain 2, designed by Crit Academy, aka Justin Handlin, with Alex Clippinger, Gene Lorber, Daniel Xavier, and Chris Karelis for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping, supporting me via patreon.com/RogueWatson. Last year, I reviewed Fantastic Terrain 1, it's called Fantastic Terrain, which added over 50 supernatural regions, environmental hazards, trap-type areas. And in between now and then, we've had a little thing called Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which added its own supernatural region. That got me thinking, what are supernatural regions? Like, what could they involve? Now, Tasha's includes D100 tables of some sensory effects, and some of them are actual, detrimental. They're exhaustion effects or damage, or some kind of spell goes off or something. And there's all kinds of different regional effects here. Fantastic Terrain 2, like the first one, is much smaller in scope and values quantity over quality to an extent, because the actual entries, although there are 50 of them, somehow we get another 50. They are just a couple paragraphs. So unlike taking up entire pages and having all these different effects and tables and things, there's basically just a single, area that has some kind of special effect to it. And this could be anything from mudslides and kelp mats to deserts and snow that would all do some obvious things and some not so obvious things, versus ones that, and to an extent, I think terrain is maybe a bit of a misnomer, because there'll be like statues and portals and elemental gems. None of that is terrain. Unlike the first one, which when I went back and looked through it, it really was more about like literal walking through stuff and having, the terrain itself be some kind of supernatural effect. Whereas here, maybe, I don't know if it's quite half and half or not, but a lot of them were just more like supernatural objects, which are the kind of things that you would, find in a dungeon that would check off that exploration checkbox. So I'm not complaining about that, because I think that's a really nice thing to have. But I'm just explaining that because if you're like me, you think terrain and you specifically conjure up images of biomes like desert and snow and jungle and ocean. Like, those are all terrain. Things like, gems and crystals and statues. I necessarily wouldn't include that in terrain so much as like, magic, like wells and things. Like, those are just things that you would find in a dungeon room, basically. I don't necessarily consider that terrain. There are some really cool ideas in here still, and some not so cool ones. This Desert of Echoes is really cool. Basically, anytime you speak at all, whether it's a whisper or louder, it deals thunder damage back to you, and that scales to like how loud you're being, including like swords clashing. So that forces the players to have to like whisper each other, or maybe do like thieves' cant or something. The Rewind Grove, I should have wrote down page numbers and I did not, but I believe it's all alphabetical. Features trees infused with temporal magic. So as you walk through, these trees will just explode, and they will freeze in kind of mid shrapnel, which causes different, damaging effects. And then they will actually reform, which could potentially cause people to get trapped inside of them. So multiple things happening as you walk around. So some of these are, you're walking through and you're having to survive the environment itself. And others, it's something that you choose to interact with. And not all of it is bad either. There's the King's Champion is a statue, which if you're a lawful good creature, you can touch it and make a insight check and lose a hit die to gain a magical spectral axe as an ability. The Mountains of Ki give more key points and give extra, basically class resource to certain classes. There's the Angel, what are they called? Angel Song Hills, which provide an additional use of the Channel Divinity and allow you to heal twice as much as normal. There's the Blood, was it Divine Blood, which if you bathe in it, gains the Greater Restoration spell and a random enhance ability on one of your stats. So not all of these are damaging. Some of them just cause, it's just like you come across a room and here's a magical effect. Do you want to jack with that thing or not? And sometimes it can be good and sometimes it can be bad. I also like there's a pile of worms that can inflict the worm torrent disease, which causes you to vomit up worms, which is really disgusting and fantastic. And the springing sands, which could potentially cause any environment to turn into this chaotic bounce house of hilariousness. Splinter glass could possibly cause people to teleport around the battlefield as you jump in and out of these mirrors that move you around. Speaking of teleporting, there's something called an erratic portal. Again, it's not really terrain to me, but there's a portal that kind of hops around via the dimension door spell, can enter people's space and then teleport them around as well. All of these are designed to make most likely existing encounters more like some of them could be encounters by themselves technically, whereas others you can see where adding encounters would obviously more be the way to go. For example, with the Zone of Unrest, gives every undead the Undead Fortitude trait and they get an advantage on the con save whenever they're rolling against Undead Fortitude. So obviously that doesn't matter unless you're filling it with undead. So specifically designed as a region filled with certain kinds of creatures. Now, all of these areas, zones, terrain, whatever we're going to call them, have this usage part to it, which I liked in the original, and to an extent, I like it here. I really wish it did more heavy lifting, because right now it does kind of the obvious thing of saying like, hey, this would be a great place to stock undead. No shit. It also has a weird tonal shift in some of these where it almost acts like the writer is let's see if I can find it good. The Wisps of the Abyss are fantastic from incorporating in a battle against a powerful divine enemy. There's some odd moments where the terrain can be used as a simple puzzle trap for low-level creatures. Some of those are pretty good. Patch of Springing can inject some unwanted acrobatics, otherwise ordinary fight at a specific location. Where I just thought a lot of these felt like the writer was critiquing their own thing. They were saying this is a great terrain to include in forest encounters. And it was just odd because what we got in the first one is, well, I can show you because I've actually got it open from when I was reading it. We had these really nice, we had those usage tips still, but we had these really awesome flavor text sidebars of this previous adventuring party that was commenting, complaining, warning, the reader about all these different terrains that they had, bumbled through or had survived against. Don't get any of that in the sequel. There's none of those fun flavor texts, and I really felt the loss there because it means that this sequel loses a lot of its personality, and instead all the personality is found in those little usage paragraphs, which some of them are very nice. Sometimes encounters will favor the enemies, such as monsters immune to physical resistance. I can see a group of clever kobolds getting their hands on these powerful enemies, even attaching them to wagons or carts to make them mobile magic turrets. It just sounds too conversational, a lot of these usage things. It sounds like that should be like a sidebar of somebody commenting on, how they found something, and that might be a more fun way of conveying that information. Versus the other way you could do it is go more detailed and say, hey, here are some sample encounters you can include here. Here are literally the DM text you can read when you enter this zone, and include all those little sensory effects and things. Because right now, all this terrain specifically focuses on the mechanics. Every single thing in here is mechanical in some way, and by that I mean it involves dice rolling, and it gives you, these things deal damage, or they give you some kind of buff, or have some kind of a spell effect. None of them are like, here's how you feel as the player. This is what happens. Like, this is what you hear. This is what you smell. They don't really have any of that in here. So you lose a lot of the role-playing point of view for entering all of these zones, which, you don't necessarily have to have that stuff, but I think it's nice, and it can be, especially if you just want to include one little paragraph at the beginning when they first enter this zone and talk about why this reflective snow is so damn reflective, because I've seen snow and it is very reflective. People usually wear sunglasses if they're skiing for that reason. But in this case, like, why is this snow actually literally make you make a con save, or you're blinded and gain a level of exhaustion? Like, why is it just so blinding? So I think some more flavor text would have really helped here, and maybe some more details on, how best to use these areas. So Yes, I still like that we still have the usage sections for all of these terrain, but I kind of want more now. I mean, it's been a year, and we had 50 hazards already, and I think these, for the most part, are pretty good. There are some not so good ones. Like the sentient mist is just a pain in the ass fog cloud that moves around and can cause exhaustion. There's spell gorging plants, which just mean you have to make an ability check every time you cast a spell, or you could lose that spell, kind of like as if every spell is a spell scroll suddenly. Swamp moss is just sticky swamp, where you have to kind of free yourself, or you can get stuck. Obviously, doesn't matter unless there's any enemies nearby. And then obviously the reflective snow is not very exciting in of itself. So, some of them aren't too helpful, but I still appreciate having that usage, information in there. I wanted more though, and I think mainly what I wanted was fewer encounters, fewer terrain, fewer hazards, and each one of them be expanded. And maybe I did get spoiled from Tasha's in terms of how those had tables and tables for all of their regions. I don't necessarily need that here. I don't need tables of different things that can happen to players when they step into and add that much, variety. But at least give me some more sensory effects. Give me some read aloud text with all of these, and give me some more examples of here are sample encounters you can include, or where these would be featured, and those kind of that bit of information would be really helpful. Versus just including like 50 of these and just kind of throwing a whole bunch of things at the wall, hoping some of these stick. And some of them do stick. Like there are some really neat ideas in here that, somehow I'm impressed that we still came up with 50 more ideas despite already having 50 more in the first Fantastic Terrain. So I guess that's a huge positive right there, even though they're not all winners, and they're certainly not all winners in the first one either. So obviously the layout is perfectly fine, the design, all of that. I kind of liked the art design more in the first one, honestly. If we're going to flip through this is the first one we're flipping through now. I don't know, it just kind of jumped out more, having those sidebars. The tables were all big, the font was different. Like, it just, I don't know, it just kind of popped a little bit more for me than the second one. So this is a weird case where I feel like the first one just kind of loses a bit of its charm and personality. The second one loses a bit of its charm and personality compared to the first one, even though I think I may like the hazards and areas more in this one versus the first one. And I like the fact that there's more variety, and it's just some of them are just like orbs and gems and statues versus literally just a bunch of seaweed and grass and that kind of stuff, because that's at this point the first one covered a lot of that, so that part of it's pretty solid. Let's go over my pros and cons for Fantastic Terrain 2. I'm gonna say Terrain Harder, but that wouldn't be the right, it would be Fantastic Terrainer. That sounds terrible. Pro, 50 supernatural areas, objects, or traps. So I will include the quantity as a pro, but in the future, I would have preferred quality over quantity. And the pro, every zone includes usage notes for tips on how to use them. Basically, I copied and pasted my pros from the first one because it's all pretty much designed the same way, and I enjoyed that aspect of the first one, and I don't feel like that has changed too much. But I think the bar has raised somewhat, and which I included in my con, is that I would prefer more quality over quantity here, maybe fewer but more detailed regions and objects, including perhaps some sample encounters, and especially sensory effects, either ones that you deploy upon your players, or just give me read aloud text when they at least first enter the zone. And I think that would add to the flavoring. And if we need to have only 20 of them, but that they're more, there's more involved, there's more ways to use them and all that, then I think I would prefer that versus 50 of them that don't have a whole lot of information per terrain. Although I keep saying terrain because that's what the title of it is, but I think terrain is still a bit of a misnomer at this point into the second one. Final verdict. Though it lacks the personal charm of the original, Fantastic Terrain 2 provides even more supernatural areas and effects to heighten your regions and encounters. Thank you everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons: Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Manuel, Wizard, Princess, Christopher, Thomas, Captain Mike, Adam, Aiden, Instant Lose, Roger, Stan, Nathan, and Alex. Gold patrons: RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcos Dade, Vicente, Gilberto, Dead Lizard, Lounge, Sam, Ross, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy 619, Scully, Nick, Farty Mick, Butterbands, Blood Angel, Baroness, Baboon, Nathan, and Fast Like a Tortoise. Thank you all very much for your support.